Oh my god, yes, we're finally here. Look, if you guys remember last year, around this time, actually, I believe, I put out a video basically talking about all of the Sundance movies I was able to watch because of Sundance putting them, digitally. I was able to watch a good majority of them, and I'll be honest with you guys, like, this year, I didn't think I was going to be able to watch as many. I had a plan originally to watch, over, 10 or 20 of them, but by the time Sundance rolled around, I just didn't really have that much money, and because of that, I had to be very selective with what I ended up seeing. But thankfully, towards the back half of the fest, I'm talking awards have come out and we know what's won certain things. I really took advantage of that because there were certain movies that I really wanted to watch, and thankfully I did get to. So I will be talking about at least 5 to 6 films in this video, which I'm happy about. I thought I was only going to be talking about 3, so I'm happy that I was able to see a few more than I really did expect. And also, just because of the fact that it was at the fest, I threw one at the end that I didn't see at Sundance, but was a part of the festival, so I might as well, talk about it regardless, because it seems like a film that definitely should be getting a lot of attention. I really enjoyed doing this video last year. These Sundance films, a lot of them are ones that I think, either they get really popular in the beginning and they kind of fade out, looking at quite a few of the films I really did love last year, or they're films that do continue to dominate the conversation. Look at Coda, for example, last year. Everybody was talking about it in the beginning, and people are still talking about it now. So I'm hoping with these films that I'm discussing that we're able to get the next Coda. We're able to get, the next, Judas and the Black Messiah. I hope we're able to get that with these films. I know some of them have already come out already, but regardless, I do still want to take the time to talk about them. I will say right off the bat that, as opposed to last year, there isn't a single film I'm talking about that I don't at least like, so I think that's very exciting. I just want to go ahead, though, and get into the first film. Alright, so the first movie I'm talking about is The Worst Person in the World, and look, this is one that was obviously very high on my list for a couple reasons. One, obviously, I'm still finishing up watching 2021 films, and this was very much at the top. I've heard nothing but amazing things about this film for quite a while now, so I had this very high on my radar, especially hearing it was going to be at Sundance. I thought this is the only time I'm going to get to see it, so I saw it, and my god, did this film blow me away. I mean, right off the bat, I think what's so relatable about this film is really just our main character in general. I mean, this is a woman that is very far from the worst person. It's a very ironic title in that way, but yet because of how self-destructive she is to pretty much everyone around her, she feels that way because she's constantly feeling like everyone else is so much better than her. They all have these successes, they all have these really great lives, and she herself is kind of stuck. She doesn't really know. She has an idea of what she wants to do, but she doesn't really know how to go about it, how she's going to have the means to achieve it, how is that going to conflate with her love life and things like that. And I think that's what makes this film so human in that way. And Renate Reinsve gives such an incredible performance here. At points, she's downright hilarious because you're seeing her character, making all of these decisions, and you're just kind of wondering, how exactly is this going to work out for her? How is she able to balance everything? And I think that's what really sticks out to you about Julie. We start off the film and she is this medical student of sorts, and, she wants to pursue, psychology and things. She can't seem to figure out what she really wants to do. She keeps shifting careers and things like that, but she also is, very focused on her relationship, but she doesn't really know, how to really go about that either. So again, this is just a character that you really do find yourself gravitating towards, and I think Reinsve just does such a great job portraying her. It's actually I think it's about 10 years throughout this character's life, and you really do see Julie kind of change as a character, but also not change. There are a lot of similar behaviors that Julie does exhibit, and I think that's something this film does a really good job with, is that while Julie does change, there are certain things about her that simply don't, and I think that's something that a lot of people are going to find themselves very much latching onto. There's a lot of moments with her that I thought worked really well for me. There's one monologue she has especially towards the end of this film that honestly is one of the most insightful I've heard in a very long time. I really loved what they ended up doing with her, and the way the movie ends as well is just so poignant, and I thought it brought this whole other meaning to the film that just worked so well for me overall, and I thought they did such an amazing job with that. I have to say though, as like Renate Reinsve was great here, Anders Danielsen Lai as Axel I really wish was getting a lot more attention as well, because I really like where his character is in contrast, because he is this writer of sorts, and he's made some kind of questionable decisions when it comes to his intent, what he really wants to write about and things like that. He was writing this like very serious book, and it's gone in a lot more of a childish direction, and you can see that he's very like disgruntled about this. And though this isn't something we focus that heavily on, there's one chapter, because the majority of this film, actually the whole film is divided into different chapters, there's one chapter that's solely based around that, and my god was it powerful. I mean, everything it had to say about like artistic intent and things like that I thought was just so interesting to watch, and I really loved what they end up doing with that. So yeah, there's a lot to really love about this one. Both of the romances that Julie ends up pursuing, she's in this like love triangle of sorts, both of them are very interesting to watch because they're in such different places in their life, both Axel and Elvind, and you can understand why she gravitates towards both of them, and I thought they did such an amazing job with that. The directing by Joachim Trier, I have not seen any of his other films prior to this. I know this is part of like this like Oslo trilogy. I'll have to get around to the other films at some point, but I will say watching this one, I didn't really feel confused or anything like that. Obviously because they're centered around different characters, but I guess they all have, similar themes and things like that. But I think he did a really good job directing this film, because again, it feels so authentic and things like that, and I think it's something that a lot of people are going to relate to. It's one of those romantic comedies that really just kind of tells it like it is. It doesn't try to like, it really doesn't try to like fantasize anything. It's very it's very down to earth, and I think that's something that you really do relate to when it comes to Julie. I mean, we're really watching this character through her best and her worst, and I think that's something that this movie just does such a phenomenal job with overall. I think his directing was just really great here. Like I said, there were some moments I found myself laughing out loud, but then some moments where I found myself honestly getting pretty emotional. I thought, that was something that they just did a really great job with, and I think the movie can be very slice of life, and I think that's something that some people are not really prepared for, is that this is not one of those movies where it has this like really big plot. It's very like event based, but I think the movie is that much better because of it, because it isn't really trying to do anything crazy. It really is just trying to present Julie's life and showing the various choices that she makes and how that really does affect her, later on. I thought all of that was super well done. There were a lot of things that they were foreshadowing early on that I did not realize that they were, and I just thought overall the screenplay was easily one of the best of the entire year. It's very easy to see why this did get nominated. I'm so happy it ended up getting nominated for original screenplay, because I think it very much does deserve it. The dialogue is just so witty and honest, and it's one of those movies where you're just so captivated just through these characters talking, having very difficult discussions. There's one about, there's this discussion here about the idea of, having children. There's a discussion here about jobs. There's all kinds of, different discussions going on here, and I thought overall, it just ended up being such a fantastic movie in terms of dialogue and visually as well. This film really is just so amazing to look at. It's so immaculately conceived. There's one dream sequence especially. A lot of it, I'll be honest, I don't really know what it's supposed to mean, but it was so effectively handled. It really is just one of the most impressive things I've seen all year. My only real issue, I would say, with this movie is that there is a character that gets a chapter in this film, and I just wanted a little bit more from this character. I don't want to get into it too much, but there is an aspect of a pretty major character involved in this movie that we briefly see something about, and I wish the movie would have like expounded upon that a little bit more. But other than that, I think this is a really well done film. I think it's a film a lot of people are going to find themselves relating to, and it's very easy to see why a lot of people are calling this one the best of last year. I would very much call it one of the best of last year as well. I think it's a movie that really just has a little something for everyone, whether it's comedy, whether it's emotion, whether it's, you know, the romantic aspect. There's just so many amazing things when it comes to the worst person in the world. The themes that this movie has, I think, are honestly universal, and I think Renate Reinsve, you know, really is going to be a star after this film. I can't wait to see what else she does end up doing in the future. Joachim Trier is definitely a director I'm going to try to check out, you know, other films from him moving forward. Overall, I was just a really big fan of this one. I can very easily see why so many people have been praising it so much throughout the year. So this one absolutely gets an A. If you haven't watched it yet, I cannot recommend enough. You need to check this one out as soon as possible. I know it's kind of in a limited run in theaters, but whatever means you have to do so, seek this one out immediately because it really is something special. All right, now we're going to get to the ones that not as many people have seen. People who at Sundance have seen, but not as many people have been able to seek out this film. This first one I'm talking about is 892, and this one I was really interested in. Mainly just the premise itself was very secretive, where, you know, we're focusing on this true story, which I, again, did not know anything about going in, but focusing on this guy named Brian Brown Easley, and he is this former, you know, Marine veteran, and he's in some really bad financial trouble. I mean, he is practically homeless, and he's very worried about the effects this is going to have on like his family and his daughter and things like that, mainly because of what's happened to him, you know, with the VA. He was owed all of this money from the Veteran Affairs, and he hasn't really gotten back a single cent of it, and basically he's gotten to a point where in order to, you know, give his daughter a better life, he's gonna rob this Wells Fargo bank, but also is threatening to bomb the entire place if his demands are not met. And this film is really fucking good. There was a lot of things that I was not really prepared going into when it came to this movie. One is, I mean, obviously I knew this was gonna be a pretty emotional film, but I was not expecting this to be as much of like a bottle film as it really is. I mean, the majority of this movie, we are inside this bank. We don't really know what's going to happen to any of these characters, if this guy actually has this bomb, if he actually plans to do what he's going to do, and is he going to be able to get what he really does want. And I think that's something that, you know, you really latch onto immediately when the movie very quickly gets you into his plan, really puts you in this very like hostile environment. But then what it does even better is really get you into the head of Brian as a character, because this is someone that obviously, yeah, I mean, you read the plot, you think he's a little bit insane, but when you understand what he's gone through, you can understand why he is going to this level. Why is he taking these extreme measures to get what he wants? You can kind of understand why, and I think they do a really excellent job with that, whether it comes to, you know, his love for his family, or the, you know, very traumatic past that he's really had, or the clear PTSD that he's had from being in the war and things like that. All of that is so well explored in this movie, and, you know, really kind of sheds light on sort of like the sort of corruptness of the VA. I feel like it's something that we don't see a lot in films like this. A lot of, you know, military films are very like, you know, pro-military and things like that, and this film isn't really like that. This film really is kind of getting more into like the negative aspects of that lifestyle, and that's something that I did appreciate when it came to this film. But also, what an incredible performance from John Boyega here. He might just give the best performance of his entire career. So transformative in this role, and someone you just can't take your eyes off of. He is very soft-spoken at first. You're having a hard time at first really kind of rationalizing his actions, but the more the film goes on, the more you really do find yourself drawn to him as a character. And he has one monologue especially that is just so heartbreaking to listen to, but is begging for Oscar attention. I'm telling you, like, if this is not the role that gets John Boyega an Oscar nomination, I really don't know what else he has to do, because he really just pours his heart and soul into this role, and I think he just does such an amazing job in this movie. Boyega's always been an amazing actor, but but I feel like films like this and Red, White, and Blue really show just how much he's been done dirty as an actor in other films. I mean, I really wish he was given more of an opportunity like this, because this is very much in his wheelhouse. These are exactly the kind of movies that he needs to be doing, and I just was so blown away by him in this film, and I think he is definitely going to be like the main takeaway for most people in this movie. But also I want to shed light on Nicole Beharie, who is equally as great in this film. She is one of the bank tellers in the movie, and she kind of develops this bond with Brian of sorts, and I wasn't expecting her to get quite as much depth as she did, but they really do go in with her character and sort of, you know, how relatable this kind of a story. She's kind of in a similar place in life when it comes to, you know, her family and things like that, and I really ended up enjoying the bond that these two had throughout the movie. I think she was just such a huge standout for me. I've heard great things about her as an actress, but I've never really seen her before, and after this, like, I really want to see more of her in other films because I think she was a huge standout here. Not to mention the late great Michael K. Williams. This is a really great last role for him. He actually had more to do than I was initially expecting. I kind of expected in the beginning of the movie for him to just kind of be like, he's just the cop, he's trying to, you know, handle the situation as delicately as possible, because he really is like the only person that's like somewhat rational in this movie. All of the other cops, you can see that, you know, they're going to really like extreme measures to make sure this is dealt with. I'm pretty sure you can understand what I'm talking about when I mean that, but he really is like the one character that is really trying to understand the gravity of what's going on here, and sort of his unlikely bond with Brian. Again, there's, similar to Nicole Beharie, there's a lot of similarities between these two characters, and he really kind of ended up being the heart and soul of the entire movie, I think. And I really loved, you know, what he ended up doing. It's a damn shame that he's no longer with us, because you're reminded how much Williams is able to just completely just captivate you as an actor, someone that you just immediately find yourself, you know, drawn to, and I think he just does such an amazing job here. I was very happy that this was not a wasted role in any way. I do think this is a really good one for him to end on, particularly in the third act of the movie. He honestly had me wallowing up in quite a few places, and I really enjoyed, you know, what they end up doing with his character overall. But again, it's also just the uncertainty of this film, not really knowing how this is all going to play out. The anticipation of everything, I think, is just so well built throughout this entire movie. There is this uncertainty that kind of looms throughout the entire film. And Abby Damaris Corbin, I think this is a really good directorial debut from her, especially watching the interview, because obviously, you know, they do the interviews, you know, after every film at Sundance, and hers really stuck out to me because you can see that this actually was kind of a passion project for her. Her father went through a very similar situation, you know, with the VA, and she really wanted to depict just what the lengths that people go to make sure that, you know, they get these goals met and that they're able to, you know, financially support themselves. I thought was just so well done. I really liked her directing throughout this entire movie. I never really felt like she was undercutting any of what we were going through, even though, again, we're kind of just like dropped into this situation. I think overall she still did a really good job with directing this movie. The screenplay as well, so much great dialogue throughout this entire film. Although I will say the only thing that does bring this movie down for me is that besides those three characters I mentioned, the other characters in this movie are kind of lacking depth, especially I would say Selenis, Leyva, the other bank teller that we come across, really does not have much to do here, and I understand that's the point. I get that this character is handling things a lot differently than Nicole Beharie, just because of just how taken aback she is by everything, but I wanted a little bit more of a deep dive with her, and they really did not give that to me. Connie Britton's character, I also feel, really does not have that much to do here. She's kind of just someone that Brian turns to in order to make sure that this event is publicized and that more people know what's going on. I like what they did with her character, but I just felt they could have done just a teeny bit more with her. But other than that, I was a really big fan of this movie. I found it to be a very relenting film, but also one that ended up being very very emotional and really covered a story that I think should be getting a lot more attention. I've not really heard about this very much at all, and I think this is a film that definitely sheds light on something that I think is very important. It's got such an amazing performance from John Boyega, and the ending is just all kinds of an emotional wallop. I just really love this movie quite a bit. I think people are really going to find themselves attached to this character, attached to, you know, the situation that he is going through, and really just wanting to do something about it. You know, I think it's one of those kind of movies, and again, while sometimes I do think it can get into some cliches, I think what it does really well, that's what really does stick out to me here, whether it's the performances, whether it's, you know, what it really has to say about the VA and war experiences and things like that. I think all of that was just really insightful stuff. It's a very emotional film in that way. His relationship with his daughter, I think, is also just so well documented. This is just a movie that I really found myself really loving quite a bit. It ended up being a very riveting thriller, but also just a really emotional drama that I really was just very happy I took the time to watch. So 892 for me absolutely gets an A-. I really hope this is a film that is talked about a lot more towards the end of the year, especially in terms of Oscar potential for John Boyega. Alright, so the next movie I'm going to be talking about for a while was, I thought, the last Sundance movie that I would be discussing here, and that's Emily the Criminal. This was one that I was very much looking forward to. Seeing Aubrey Plaza was in it. I think she has just been knocking it out of the park lately in terms of, you know, any movie that she's been in, and this is another really solid effort from her. I will say right off the bat, this is not on the level of, like, Black Bear or something like that, but I still think she gives a really admirable performance in this movie. There's a lot more to this film than I kind of did expect going in. I think going in, I was expecting a little bit more of like a generic kind of heist film, and I thought that's kind of all this was really going to be. The movie has a little bit more going on besides that, you know, because similar to how the last film really dealt with how the VA can fuck you over, this film kind of deals with how much student debt can really hurt you, because Emily is someone who is desperate for work. She's coming out of college. She really wants to be able to get this job to pay off her student loans and things like that. And you can see that a lot of people just are not taking her all that seriously. She's not able to get the work that she really does. And so because of that, she ends up in this very dangerous sort of underworld in Los Angeles, where she's going to have to pull off some schemes in order to get money. And you can understand why she makes the decisions that she does in this movie. And I think they do a really good job to kind of lay the groundwork. So when this character is making the decisions that she is and going to the lengths that she's, you know, and really just going to the lengths that she's willing to in order to, you know, achieve this goal, I think you really are with her throughout this entire thing. And I think Plaza's performance is just so deeply relatable in that way, because she doesn't really understand what she's getting herself into. She's very naive at first, and you can see that she's very sort of skittish about what she really is doing, but throughout the film really becomes a lot more confident. This really does change her as a person, and I thought they did a really, I thought Plaza just did such an amazing job with that. I was so impressed by her performance here, and I think this is definitely, it's a very subtle performance. Like, this is not on the level, like I said, of like Black Bear or Legion or something like that, but it still is a really damn good performance that I think a lot of people are really going to find themselves loving quite a bit. But Theo Rossi should be getting just as much attention in this movie, because his character as well had more depth to him than I expected. I thought he was just going to be like the guy that's kind of just like barking orders at her, but these two strike up a very genuine bond, and you find yourself very attached to them. You want them to be able to get out of this situation okay, and that's something that I really do appreciate with this movie. It's not really just about let's just pull off this scheme. It's, are these two characters going to be able to get out of this, you know, smoothly? Is this going to work out for them, or are they going to suffer a very sort of violent fate? And I thought that's something that you know, they really did a great job with. John Patton Ford, I think, in terms of the writing here, really kind of latches you on to both of these characters, and that's something that I really did appreciate when it comes to this movie. But in general, this is such an intense film to watch. Anytime there's some sort of heist scheme going on here, forget it. I mean, this film is just so unrelenting in that way. There's one scene especially involving Gina Gershon's character, and I'm not gonna say too much more than that, but my god, it's one of the most intense things I've seen in quite a bit. I just really love how much this film, builds tension, things like that. I've heard a lot of people compare this film to Uncut Gems, and I think that's a bit unfair to this movie, because yes, it is very intense at points, but this movie is a completely different animal in that way. Emily is not like Howard Ratner, who is this terrible person that's like in over her head. Like, she has a genuine reason for doing what she's doing. She's not nearly as stubborn as like Howard Ratner is. Like, I don't think it's like the greatest comparison, just because this movie is another very like, it's a very intense film that really kind of gets under your skin and has you on the edge of your seat. I would not compare it to Uncut Gems very much at all, because I think it's really nothing like that at all. It's just a really solid crime thriller at the end of the day. I think the only thing that really does bring it down for me is that sometimes the movie can get a little too simplistic in that way, and I think there were some things that I wish they dived into a little bit more here. Aside from Emily and Theo Rossi, the other characters, there really just isn't all that much to them, and I wish they had done a little bit more overall. But again, I really like what this film has to say about like how much millennials can be fucked over through like capitalism and things like that. I think all of that is really well portrayed in this film, and I think, like I said, the tension is just so solid here, and Aubrey Plaza is so magnificent in this role. This is really just a very well done crime thriller. It's a much darker film than I really did anticipate going into it, but it's one that I very much do recommend. Like I said, there's some things I wish that it did a little bit better. There's some conversations that I wish went on a little bit longer, but the third act especially is fantastic here, and there were some places they went that I really was very taken off guard by, but in a really good way. Like, I wasn't expecting them to go to some of the places that they did in this movie, but I think it definitely worked out. I wasn't big, I will say the ending of this movie, I wish they could have dived into a little bit more, but I really do like the way they do wrap things up. What they're trying to say at the end, I think makes a lot of sense overall. So I would definitely recommend this one quite a bit. I think especially if you're an Aubrey Plaza fan, you'll be very impressed by this one. So I'm going to give Emily the Criminal a B. All right, so the next one I'm talking about is probably, I would say, like, the hit film of the entire fest. Like, this is the movie people really can't shut up about, and for good reason, and that's Cha-Cha Real Smooth. My God, this film absolutely blew me away, and really, I think was kind of the film that I needed to see at the time that I did, because just the premise of this movie alone was deeply relatable to me. We're focusing on this guy, he's just gotten out of college, and really is kind of unsure what he wants to do with his life, what direction he really wants to go, and that's something that I found to connect to almost immediately, because I'm kind of in a similar place in life where, like, I have an idea of what I want to do, but do I really, like, have a goal and have, like, sort of, like, a whole, like, have it all mapped out, have a plan? Not really, and that's kind of where Cooper Raiff's character is in this movie. He knows what he's good at, he knows what he wants to do, but he doesn't really have much of a path set in stone, and so he starts, like, being the one to being this, like, hype man at, like, bar mitzvahs and things like that, and really bonding with Dakota Johnson's character, who's in a very similar place despite being a much different age than him, significantly older, in, like, her 30s or whatever. I really just found him to be such a relatable sort of character, the dilemma that he's going through. I think a lot of people are going to find themselves connecting to, and I think this movie, really just does such an amazing job with that. It's very insightful in that way, and really just showing, like, how challenging adulthood can really be. For some people, they aren't able to just work things out immediately. It does take a while for people to figure out what kind of path they want to pursue, and that's something I really like about, Andrew as a character, because on the surface, he's very confident. He seems to be someone that, you know, really has everything figured out. He's very approachable in that way, but he knows so little about like who he is or what he really wants to do in life. And he really just, I think, is someone that I, again, really just found myself latching onto, mainly because of how good Cooper Raiff is in this film. He strikes that balance so well of someone that seems like they have everything figured out, yet knows so little about themselves. And I absolutely loved what he ended up doing here. You can see how personal of a project this really was for him. I know Cooper Raiff's only other film that he's done was basically about like entering college, and this is kind of like the companion piece of that, about leaving college. And again, I mean, he has a real bright future ahead of him as a filmmaker. I cannot wait to see what else he's really going to do moving forward, because just everything he did here in terms of both acting, directing, just really just blew me away. And I think he gives one of the most memorable performances of the entire year. I know it's still very early, but this is a performance that I'm going to be singing the praises of for a very long time. But do not think by any stretch of the imagination that I am trying to negate the work from Dakota Johnson here either, because she should be just as praised in this movie. Her performance here is easily the best, I think, of her entire career. Again, mainly because of what they end up doing with her overall. I think Domino is someone who, you know, again, seems like she is well established. She's this mother. She has this daughter that is on the spectrum that she really does support, you know, who she really would do anything for. She seems to be, you know, very confident in that way, but she also is like very conflicted where she really wants to go in life. You know, she has this guy that she's engaged to, and you're not really sure, you know, what path she really is going to choose. And I like the way they take these two, the direction that they end up taking them, because this is not really a romantic comedy of sorts. Like, they're much more of kindred spirits, I would say. They lean onto each other because they are actually in very similar places, and I just found it so endearing to watch. Every sort of conversation that they would have, I just really ended up loving every second of, whether it's just them talking about their futures, their possible directions that they can take their life in, or just little casual conversations about how good Andrew is at making people happy and dancing and things like that. It was just something I really loved in this movie. I thought they did a really great job when it came to both of their characters, and I think their performances really do reflect that quite well. And again, I just really love what this film has to say about growing up and how challenging it can really be. I think it's just such an excellent look into how much of a struggle that is, because I don't think a lot of films portray that. A lot of the time when you see films about people, you know, fresh out of college, it's like they know what they want to do and they end up achieving that. This movie isn't really like that. This movie is more about Andrew just trying to find himself and really just understanding that while he's an adult, he still is very young. He still has a lot of choices to make within his life, and I really like what this movie has to say about all that. It's a very positive and inspiring film that I think is really going to get to a lot of people. I want to talk about the other performances here. Vanessa Berghardt is amazing in this movie. I've never seen her before, but you know, like I said, she does play Domino's daughter, who is on the spectrum, and this film really does show what happens when you have autistic actors, you know, playing you know, you have an autistic character played by an actor that is actually on the spectrum. Makes a world of a difference, and my God, she is fantastic here. I really liked her character a lot in this movie. Someone you do find yourself latching onto, and definitely is wise beyond her years in terms of intelligence. I mean, there's so much with her character. The bond that she ends up forming with Andrew as well is just so irresistible to watch, and I loved what she ended up doing in this movie. I think she, for me, was a really big standout. Leslie Mann is great here too as Andrew's mother, who really is just doing everything she can to really support him. She's always been there for him. I really liked her a lot. And Evan Asante as Andrew's brother, you know, he's kind of going through a place in life where he is also trying to pursue, you know, relationships and things like that. And, you know, Andrew has to be that big brother for him. He feels like he needs to be the one to kind of step up. And I liked where they end up going with their relationship. There was more with that than I was expecting. Even Odia Rush as a character, they did a little bit more with her than I thought they would. She is an old friend of Andrew's. They went to high school together, and these two kind of start seeing each other a little bit. And I really enjoyed her character quite a bit because I think she represented a different side of you know, a different side of someone that is, you know, getting out of college than Andrew really did. So I thought overall that was definitely, you know, really well done in this film. Just in general, I really love what this film has to say about adulthood and things like that. And the way Cha Cha Real Smooth really kind of like intertwines with the entire film. The scenes of Andrew trying to hype up people at bar mitzvahs and things like that are really fun in this movie. And trust me when I say it is a very accurate title, because the scene in question involving it is insane. That is all I will say. This movie is also absolutely hysterical. There's so many moments I found myself in stitches during this movie. So yeah, I just think this is a movie that a lot of people are really going to find themselves gravitating towards. It's going to be very relatable for a lot of people. I think especially if you're in a similar position with Andrew, where you're out of college and you're really just kind of like, you're really just kind of grappling with what you really want to do. I think that's something that a lot of people are really going to find themselves latching onto. Or maybe you're like Domino, where you are well established, but yet you're not really sure if this is the path you really want to take in life. You know, I think there's a lot of different ways that you can end up relating to this movie. The script is just so witty here. Every conversation is just so riveting to watch, and you find yourself just really latching onto these characters who honestly after a while did not feel like characters to me. They just felt like real people going through, you know, human struggles. And I think that's something that I really loved when it came to this movie. So many amazing performances. I think my only real issue with this film is, even though I touched upon how Odia Rush's character had more to do than I expected, I would have wanted a little bit more when it came to that character. I think that she is kind of underused in this movie, and I think they could have done a little bit more when it came to what she really wants in life. But other than that, I mean, I could honestly see that not being an issue on future watches. I'm so happy that Apple TV Plus ended up picking this one up. I think they're going to give this one an amazing awards campaign. I see a lot of praise going towards Cooper Hoffman and Dakota Johnson especially. Hopefully Vanessa Berghardt as well. Just so many amazing things when it comes to this movie. It's endearing. It's funny. It's one that a lot of people are going to latch onto, and I think it's going to be a real crowd pleaser for sure. It's easily one of my favorites of the entire year. I cannot wait to see it again when it comes out in I believe it comes out in June or July, but either way, I'm just very happy that this film is getting, hopefully is going to be able to get the audience that it really does deserve, because I do think this movie is something very special. I really do want to check out Hoffman's other work as well, Shithouse. I've not seen that movie, and I really wanted to after this. So overall, I just can't help but sing this movie's praises any more than I already have. So absolutely, I'm giving this one an A. I can't recommend this film enough. If I had to pick one film for you to like seek out immediately at Sundance, for me, this is very much the one. All right, so technically the final Sundance movie I'm talking about in terms of ones I saw at Sundance, like I said, the last one I'm talking about I didn't really see at Sundance. This one, of course, is After Yang, and this is a very somber sci-fi film. I've seen a lot of comparisons right off the bat to Ex Machina, and I'll just be frank, I don't really understand it. I really don't at all. This is really nothing like that film. Ex Machina is a very, like, riveting thriller about the, you know, it's sort of like the juxtaposition of like humans and, you know, technology, and sort of like how those two things start to blend together. This film isn't really like that. This film is much more somber and slow moving, and I think for some people could get a little too like monotonous in that way because it is very slow moving, but there is a, you know, sort of immediacy to this film. There's sort of there's an inevitability to this film that is something that a lot of people, I think, are going to get very emotional during. I think people are really going to find themselves latching onto the dilemma of these characters, because you understand the position that this family is in. You know, Yang is someone who has bonded, who, yes, is sort of become this son of sorts to Colin Farrell and Jodie Turner-Smith's characters, but what matters more is that Yang really has become this brother for their daughter, who, of course, And, Mika, of course, is someone who is Asian herself and really does bond with Yang through that. These two, have this understanding of each other that we know that they're, she's really not going to have with anyone else. Colin Farrell and Jodie Turner-Smith's characters, as much as they love her, are never really going to be able to bond with her over that. And so they really do have this dilemma of sorts where you can see that Yang throughout this movie is deteriorating. He very much does need to be, decommissioned. He very much does need to be kind of, a lot of these issues don't seem to be very fixable in that way, but yet you can see that they're trying to hold out as much hope as they possibly can. They don't want to have to break this news to Mika. They don't want to have to, replace him, but you can see why this is such a tough sort of struggle for them, and I think that's something that really I just found very touching in that way. And Yang as a character is really incredible in this movie. Just the way that he looks at life and certain these things like that, I just found to be some of the best conversations in this film. I think there are some really insightful moments between these characters, and I really did love that quite a bit. And a lot of this movie, I will say, and the thing I think that might bother some people, a lot of this movie is really just a collection of memories, because in this sort of futuristic world, there's this technology where you're able to kind of access people's memories, mainly as almost as if they're like video clips of sorts. And we can see, Jake, Colin Farrell's character, kind of is like cycling through that. And there's some of the best moments of the entire film. You really get the sense of the bond that Yang had and how he really did change all of these characters' lives for the better. I think that's something the movie really does do an excellent job with, and kind of following Colin Farrell as the main lead, I think was definitely the right choice, because again, he's the character that I think you're going to feel the most in terms of relatability. He's the one that really kind of feels like that sort of morally ambiguous center, where like he knows what he needs to do, but he doesn't want to have to do it. He doesn't want to have to come to that conclusion. And I really love that about his character. I think he gives one of the best performances, really, of his career in this movie. It's a very subtle performance. This is not a very showy performance that I think is going to get him like a lot of Oscars and things like that. But my God, is it an effective one? And I think he really just does amazing work here. For me, though, I gotta say, Justin H. Min really ended up running away with this entire movie. Just again, Yang's sort of outlook on life and the impact he's had on everyone. He just does such an amazing job with that. The way he's able to bring so many human features to this character, really just giving all of the pathos needed to this AI, I just really loved in this movie. He's so much more human than we would think he is, and I think that's something that really worked very well here. But I also really love what this movie has to say about grief and sort of like human connection in general, because we start to realize throughout this movie there's this whole other part of Yang's life that the family never really had with him, through Haley Lou Richardson's character. And I was not expecting the movie to go to those places. I was kind of, she keeps appearing in the film and you're not really sure what her purpose is, and eventually she does develop more of one. She actually has a past with Yang's character, and I found that to be one of the best parts of the entire movie. I wasn't really expecting that specific idea, but I thought it worked really well for this film. I thought it ended up being one of the most insightful parts of this entire movie. It's just the idea that, like, you have to remember, just because someone had impact on your life, you're not the only person that they've had an impact on. There are other people within their life, and that's something this movie is very much getting into. I found it very, like, introspective in that way. And again, what the movie has to say about grief, I think it's just really well done in that way, what this is really going to do for all of these characters. Also, the one thing I will say is that regardless how you feel about this film, the cinematography is just absolutely breathtaking here. There's so many amazing shots in this movie, just of, like, the technology they have in general. So we're just, like, going through this device with Jake. It's just so visually stunning to look at, and just one of those films you really can't take your eyes off of. And the score as well here is amazing in this movie. It's one that stuck with me throughout the entire time. I absolutely adored everything going on in terms of score here. And Kaganada, I gotta say, I've heard so many things about his previous film Columbus, and I haven't gotten to see that one yet, unfortunately, but I really do understand why people have such a deep love love and respect for him, because again, just the way he connects you with these characters and really just has so many insightful things to say about just the idea of human connection in general. It's really just gonna get to you if you let this movie really just take you away. If you really just try to, you know, lend yourself to the experience of this film, I do think this film is really gonna have an impact on you. The ending especially is one of the most emotional things I've seen in a very long time. It's easily one of my favorite endings of the year so far. It's one I'm not gonna be able to stop thinking about. My only issues with this movie is that I do think there are some ideas that aren't quite as explored as I really wanted them to be. Jodie Turner-Smith's character, I wish there was a little bit more going on with her in particular. I think they could have done more with her. There's other families in this movie as well that I wish we could have latched onto. The movie opens with this amazing montage that is easily gonna be, I think, one of people's like favorite openings of the entire year, with the way they end up just really getting you, you know, really just kind of setting you up into this world, seeing what all these different families are going through. But they really only focus on this one, and I would have liked a little bit more of a deep dive there. But I'll also be honest in saying that there are some things that I don't think I fully understood about this movie. I definitely think this is a film that if I were to give it a second watch, I would like even more than I really did. So I'm very happy that this film is on Showtime, but at the same time, I do think this is a movie that's going to go under a lot of people's radars, just because of the fact that it wasn't really given that like wide release. I think this is a movie that, you know, if it was in theaters, a lot more people would have been talking about, and unfortunately I think it is going to go very underlooked in that way. But I think in general it's a film that I very much do think is worth your time for sure. It has so many interesting sort of conversations and things like that. It's a very special one. It's not going to be an easy watch. It's very somber at points for sure. The entire thing is just really sad to watch, but I think if you're able to really stick with it, I think it becomes one of the most insightful films that you'll see in quite a bit. I was a very big fan of this one. I very much want to see Kaganada's other works as well, because I think he is a very special director. Very much looking forward to Pachinko as well on Apple TV Plus. I hope that ends up being another really great work for him. But overall, just amazing things. Nothing but amazing things to say about this one. So A- for After Yang. Can't recommend this one enough. All right, so the last movie we will be discussing here, like I said, I did not end up seeing this one at Sundance, and that's Fresh. And I'm gonna be as minimal as possible when it comes to this film, because I really do think this is a movie where, look, despite all of the hype surrounding this film, you know, coming out of Sundance, everyone was saying, like, you gotta be as, like, careful as you can of skirting around spoilers. I will still say, the directions that this movie goes in, you are not prepared for. You are not going to be ready for where this film ends up going, because this starts off and you think it's just like a typical sort of romantic comedy. We're following Daisy Edgar-Jones, who, let me just say, amazing to see her in something else. Like, I'm very happy that she is acquiring more work after Normal People, because she was just an absolute revelation in that show. I could go on about that show like forever. You guys know that was my favorite show of 2020 for a reason. But I'm very happy that she's been able to get more work here. But her character, she's kind of in a place where, like, she's not really sure if she wants to date. She's struggling to, like, you know, find impressionable men and things like that, and eventually comes across Sebastian Stan's character, and they sort of have this bond, someone that really she connects with and understands, and eventually things go in a very different direction. And that's really all I can say about this, is that the movie very slowly starts to unravel into something completely different. And when it does, it becomes one of the most riveting and shocking things I think you will have seen in a very long time. I mean, I was not prepared for the directions that this movie really did take. I will be honest with you. It very much did take me off guard in a very good way. And that's the thing. I think that while this movie is very shocking, I really applaud them for going to the places that they do, because it honestly is just so insane when you realize, you know, what this movie is really doing, the places that it's going. My jaw, right around that 30-minute mark, when the movie did end up going through that shift, was just on the floor. I couldn't believe what they ended up doing. The opening credits don't appear until 30 minutes into this movie. Just so many just amazing choices here. It's such an interesting approach to this film, but it's one that I really am never going to forget in that way. And gratefully honestly, the rest of the movie, I think, is just as good. I've heard some people say the movie kind of pitters out after that, and I'll be honest, it never really did for me, because I wanted to see how she was going to be able to get out of this situation. Once you realize what she's gotten herself through, what she's really gotten herself into, the movie just becomes so much more interesting after that. And Daisy Edgar-Jones is just so good in this movie. She's so likable. You can't help but root for her. And yeah, Noah does make some questionable decisions in this film where you're just kind of like, what the fuck are you doing? Like, why would any rational human being do something like this? But at the same time, there are points in this movie where you can understand why she decided to do this, why she really latched onto Sebastian Stan as a character in the first place. I think that it did overall make sense to me, and Noah as a character I did find myself very engaged with. I wanted to know more about her. I wanted to see how she was going to get out of this, and there were a lot of things that she ended up doing in this movie that I wasn't really expecting. They kind of explore like the darker sides of her character and things like that. I can't really say much more than that, but I just really loved what she ended up doing in this movie. She was funny. She was, she was funny. She was likable. She was even scary at points, and I just really liked her in this film. But make no mistake, Sebastian Stan steals this entire movie for me. This is easily the best performance I think I've ever seen him give yet. He's always been a very charismatic actor, but here he's really able to channel this side of him that we really haven't seen before. He really kind of gets to let loose in this movie. And I feel like it's the kind of role that only someone like him could really pull off. A lesser actor, I don't think something like this could really work. And when we start to find out more about him, you are just so engrossed when it comes to him as a character. At least for me, I could not take my eyes off him. I loved everything he ended up doing here. It is really just such a amazing performance for him, and really just lets him show off his range as a character. And these two have such a natural chemistry that you really do find yourself latching onto overall. So I thought they did such an amazing job with that. And Mimi Cave, my God, I mean, what a directorial debut of a film this really is. I can't think of many directorial debuts that are this daring, that are this insane, that are willing to go to the places that this movie really does. But I am so glad that she did, because I think her directorial debut, this is such an interesting sort of style she has to this movie. The way she's able to blend, comedy and the darker elements of this film, but still maintain the comedy here. There is still a lot of dark humor throughout this movie, and a lot of it really did end up landing for me. I thought overall she just did an amazing job with directing this movie. It's such an ambitious directorial debut, and I'll say right now, like this film is really not going to work for some people. Like, I've seen some people that are very much turned off by this movie, and I can totally understand that. But I think if it does work for you, this is going to be something you're not going to be forgetting for a very long time, and one that I for sure will not be able to forget. It's a very stressful film at points, and I think that's something that was just really great here. When you start to realize what's going on, yeah, you kind of understand where the movie's gonna go, but I will be honest, there are still directions that the movie took that really threw me for a loop. That really shocked me, and I was not expecting them to go to the places that they did. The only issues I do have with this movie is that I do think there are some characters here that I would have wanted a little bit more with. I did really like Jonica T. Gibbs in this movie as the character of Molly, but she really is just kind of like the supportive friend to Noah that's trying to, check up on her every so often, and kind of pulls herself into this as well. I wish there was a little bit more to her. But the one character that I just found completely unnecessary in this movie is Dio Okenye. He really serves no purpose in this film whatsoever, other than to just have a joke at a certain point in the movie. And I just didn't find his character to be someone that I'm like, yeah, you needed him here. I feel like you honestly could have cut this guy out of the entire movie, and the movie would have basically played out the exact same way. But again, really just the things that work here, that's what really sticks out to me about this movie. The climax is just absolutely insane. I could not believe the places that this movie ended up going. Really holds nothing back in terms of violence. This is just such a ambitious film that I'm so happy was able to really be made in the way that it was. It's easily, I think, one of the best Hulu original films as well. I'm very happy that Hulu was able to acquire this movie. Like I said, it's not going to be for everyone. I can totally understand why someone didn't like it, but but my god, did this end up working for me. This is just such a memorable film that I'm very happy I was able to watch when I did. I think both these performances are so great. In particular, Sebastian Stan, really have never seen him this good before. I think this is definitely a must-watch for everyone. Even if you don't end up liking this movie, I think just the directions that ends up going, how daring it is with that approach, I think that in general just makes it such a watchable film that I think is definitely something that a lot of people are really going to find themselves loving and really gravitating towards. So absolutely, Fresh gets an A-. I really wish I could say more about it, about where the movie ends up going and just how fucked up it ends up getting. But just to keep this as, you know, as enjoyable of an experience as it was for me, to make this as memorable of an experience as it was for me, I think this really is a film to go in as cold as possible. And I know I say that with quite a few movies, but I mean it. Like, really just try to avoid spoilers as much as you can when it comes to this film, because I think it makes it that much more worthwhile overall. And with that, guys, that's it. Those are really all of the movies that I will be discussing that I did see at Sundance. I really hope that these movies are able to get a lot of attention, because I think all of them are very special and unique in their own ways for sure. I wish I was able to see more films at the fest this year, but hopefully next year I'm able to, you know, get around to a few more, and hopefully throughout the year I'll be able to watch a few more that I didn't really get to see, but we'll really just have to see. But other than that, that's it for this video. Hope you guys enjoyed it. As always, comment down below, let me know what you guys think of any of these movies that I did discuss. We'll see you guys in my next video, and we'll see you guys for that. Okay, bye.